And which is the cat and which is the mouse?
Enough of that.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Supercast. I'm your host, the man who put super in Supercast. Hadn't said that in a while. The Super Bosch. And alongside me is my buddy Steve Z. And if you're new to the show, welcome. Steve Z, how you doing, man? It seems like it's been a while for us doing this.
It's been a bit, and this is like one that we've been wanting to do, but it's hard to get things aligned. And I guess it's just the perfect time to spring into it, because this film is one that you and I, we just have a deep love for.
Oh my gosh, I don't think we can say enough good things about this film. And of course, if you guys didn't already know, which I'm sure you did when you clicked on the video, we are doing Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. Now, we've both been Hitchcock fans for a good while now. You kind of really got me started in college, I guess we'd say, being kind of a serious fan. Watched movies like Vertigo and, of course, Birds and all that. But then this movie came out in, not nowhere, but you mentioned this movie to me several months ago, I guess. And I had not seen it. Being the fan that I am, I don't even know if I've heard of it before this. So I was really, really interested in this film. Yeah, I mean, it blew me away how good it is. I mean, it's one of those films. So let's talk about you. You said you go back a little ways with this film, don't you?
Yeah, so I got this back in college after I took my Hitchcock class that I've referenced so many times on the podcast. And it introduced me to this man, this great filmmaker, his films. And I got this collection that I bought off of eBay from China, and it had every single Hitchcock film. And one of the ones I had circled for one that I wanted to watch was this one, because I just heard the premise of it. I'm like, that sounds awesome, because Rope it's really neat because it's told the way that plays used to be, like where everything's climactic, everything's told in real time. And I just hadn't seen many films like that, so I was like, that sounds really cool. I want to check that out. So I watched it then, and I was like, okay. I just kind of shrugged my shoulders a little bit. I was like, that's okay. I kind of liked it. I liked the premise. I liked some of the execution. I like how they were able to basically have what looked like it was a continuous shot the whole time. But then it was a few years ago when I revisited the film on my Hitchcock Essentials collection. Like, it was these old DVDs I had. And I guess this transfer was just a lot better, because it made me love film again, which is bizarre to say considering we have a film critiquing podcast. But yeah, I went through a phase there where film it didn't mean as much to me, which is sad. This film kind of reinvigorated me. So I kind of sat on it for a long time. I knew that you would like this film. Then all of a sudden it dawned on me when I was like scrolling through, I think it was Mac one day or YouTube, and I was like, oh, you got to watch this movie. And I to you, we both watched it. It's just an insane film. It's definitely a ride. It takes you through a lot of different places, and I get something out of it nearly every time I watch it.
Yeah, like I said, I was blown away with it the first time I've watched it. I've probably watched it, I guess, at the time of this recording, maybe 5 times already, and it just gets me every single time. And this is a film that's very interesting, and I like that you mentioned the play aspect, because, coming from my own experience doing some plays, I caught that almost instantly. It felt like you were almost watching a live play or something like that, because it's all really based in this one area. Like, they don't go to all these different sets or whatever. So it's just this one area, and it's basically a party. They have a party. By the way, we're not going to spoil the whole film, but in case we do, we will probably, leak some stuff out of the bag. But anyway, but the whole movie is in this one room, and it's a party, but it's covering up a crime that happens at the very beginning of the film. And it's a pretty shocking way to begin a film. We'll get into that in a minute. But before we get started, if you guys are fans of Hitchcock or film or anything like that, like we are, and you're new here, subscribe, leave a thumbs up on this video, because we'd really appreciate that, guys, so much. So Well, yeah, let's get into this film, man. As we said already, it was made by the incomparable Alfred Hitchcock. We're both big fans, as we said at the top. As I told you, and you and I have had a lot of conversations about this film since I actually watched it. And this is, in my opinion, not maybe your typical Hitchcock type film, but in a way, I guess it is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Just because of the macabre humor. There's a lot of humor just kind of thrown in here, but also just the premise of these two guys that killed their friend just because they can. That is Hitchcock all over. I mean, because the 40s, the 40s just in general, the noir aspects, all that stuff coming out of World War II, I think we were just a dark society. I think America in itself was just trending that way. I mean, I guess so. If you go overseas, and especially our lead here, James Stewart, he went overseas and fought and killed people, I'm guessing. I know he was not the same guy when he came back, so he sought after roles like this. But yeah, just the dark nature is very Hitchcockian. And just we were getting into earlier, how this film starts. It's wonderful because you have this score playing over these credits, and it's very light-natured. It's just we're seeing a street. It looks like, oh, this is just New York City. It's a nice little neighborhood. People are getting off work, or I guess kids are coming home from school. Just a typical day. And then it gets broken by this scream. Yeah, and it is, we zoom in and we see these two men basically have this other guy, and they're strangling him to death. And he is literally lifeless in their hands. Yeah. And it just goes from there. We're just dropped into this scenario where these two guys, Brandon and Philip, have killed their friend, and they decide to hide his body and have a party. Does that not sound like Hitchcock to you?
I'm telling you, man. Just to listen to that premise, it sounds really messed up, and I guess it is. But, oh my gosh, the whole time you're thinking through the whole rest of the film, are they going to get caught? And spoiler alert, they really don't. I mean, the film just kind of ends, but we'll get into the ending later on. But the entire film, you can't help but think of the guys they just killed. I mean, that's always in the back of your mind, everything that happens. And there's a lot of references to a lot of stuff that I was just like, wow, they're going to go down that road. Okay, all right. I mean, and let's talk about that. The subject matter of this film, or kind of the underlying thing, is these are two men, or at least, and you can kind of clarify this. I know one of them likes another one more than friends, and so that's pretty evident early on. I don't know if it's reciprocated back the other way. They don't really say, but it just makes you wonder the entire time. What do you think, man? Do you feel like that there's a mutual love for them, or is one just leading the other?
Well, and I think this is what makes this film risque for its time. And this came out in 1948, 49. And I see a lot of movies with two gay men basically on display. And that's the way I interpret the film. I mean, there's so much undertones. Their housekeeper accuses them of being catty, of being just, the stereotypes like gay men sort of thing. And I would definitely say Philip probably enjoys Brandon more, because Brandon basically can manipulate him. He realizes this. And I think Brandon, I don't think he loves anybody other than Brandon. I think he's just a very stereotypical narcissist. And Philip is just kind of along for the ride and possibly manipulated into doing something like this. I mean, I'm not going to say he's totally innocent in the matter. We'll get to that more when we talk about the character. But I think, answering your question, I think it's definitely there. And I think if it goes over your head, you're probably not reading the film right.
Right. Or you're probably too young to be watching the film or something, because, it's pretty evident. I mean, from a modern audience, I think a lot of people would probably understand what's going on, but they probably fooled a lot of people back in the day.
Yeah.
Just because that wasn't talked about so much. So they could probably easily skirt this, where the average person probably didn't even know what they were talking about.
Yeah, and I think they kind of overdo it for that first scene, because it comes in, like I said, they're embracing this guy. They've just killed him, but they're all out of breath. They're like,
Yeah.
One of them goes in for a cigarette, and the other one's like, "No, can we just sit here and enjoy this for a little bit?" I mean, this is like, like every time I watch that, I'm like, I can't believe they got away with this.
I know, right? I know. And that's the thing. You don't know what's happened with these three guys before that opening shot with the guy being strangled. So you don't know what they've been doing for the last ever how many hours. I'm sure they had taken their time a little bit, but by the time the movie begins, you're kind of like a detective. You're kind of figuring, okay, what is the chain of events here? What's going on? Why did they choose to kill this guy? I mean, and that's the thing that when you find out that they just did it just because, especially from what Brandon's concerned, I mean, it's dark. And again, I know this is Hitchcock and that's how it goes. But it really, even for Hitchcock, it really kind of surprised me how dark this film got.
Yeah, because there's a motive there, but it's a very strange motive. It's basically art. These guys are trying to do is like performance art. We killed this guy, and now we're inviting his friends over, his girlfriend over, and to kick it off. Here's his dad. He's coming over tonight, and our college professor, and it's just like, this is just a bizarre conglomeration of things. But it's just like this social experiment he's having. This sort of art on display for people to enjoy. And it's mainly for their amusement. And that's the big thing. Yeah. And Brandon goes in later. He's like, I killed him because we can kill them. That we have the authority to because we're smarter, we're more intelligent. Sort of the whole Nietzsche sort of Superman sort of thing that kind of emboldened Hitler to do what he did. And so all that's sprinkled in there. So there is a motive, but at the same time, it's kind of messed up, twisted. And I don't know. It makes it very appealing. Getting to what you were saying, how you're playing detective. To me, it's more like seeing how do these things going to fit together? How, like, why did they do this? And also just sort of, how is this going to play out? It's very much a Rube Goldberg film. It's like, as soon as the thing gets put in motion, you're just trying to see where's this going to end. And it just keeps building and building all the way to the climax.
And as we said at the beginning, this movie is based around this party, and all these people start coming in. After all that from the beginning goes through, then these people start coming in. So you're just wondering, or I would just, especially the first time I watched this film, who's going to figure it out? Who's going to figure out that there's somebody in the chest and that they killed him? We hadn't even talked about Jimmy Stewart's character. Very interesting character in his own right. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But you're just kind of on the edge of your seat, or at least I was the first time I watched it. You just don't know. But that's the brilliance of the writing of this film, is that it keeps you guessing who's going to put pieces together. And, it made for a really interesting experience.
Yeah, and I think you just hit the nail on the head. You mentioned writing. I think that's the key aspect of this film.
Yep.
Yes, Hitchcock, he does his thing. He's put all these elements in order, but since this film's kind of told in real time, he's kind of limited what he can do as far as camera shots and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's left up to the writing. It's let up these actors to kind of make these characters feel alive and make them feel three-dimensional. And I think that they kind of excel at that. Just starting with Brandon here, John Dahl, this actor is known mainly for like stage performances. And we get that in here. We get that this is a character that he was living and breathing. And definitely it seemed like to be he's relishing playing this part. He is just the way you'd want somebody to play a character like this. Having his fun, laughing, stirring the pot at times, creating controversy, creating conflict, just to see if he can get away with it. And it's very interesting. And just seeing him throughout the film and how he doesn't really change, how he has no remorse, no guilt or anything. It really gets you thinking about this guy and thinking, how did he get this? How did he become this person? There's a lot of things that go through my mind when I'm watching this character act.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing, because then you look over at the other guy, and he is not as confident. I mean, like I said earlier, I think he's got a legit thing for Brandon, and he idolizes him, but he doesn't have the charisma that Brandon has. He doesn't have the self-assuredness and he's thinking, oh, we're gonna be caught. It's gonna be bad. He's already kind of given up on himself. Whereas Brandon is so sure he's gonna get away with it, even when it looks like this character is gonna figure it out, or this character is gonna figure it out, or whatever. And there's several moments throughout the film, like I said a minute ago, where you think it's gonna happen sooner than it does, and it's insane. But the dichotomy between these two main characters, these two guys that have committed a murder, I just think it's really interesting how one can just be so nonchalant and cold and calculated and just think I'm going to outsmart everybody, and the other guy is, I probably shouldn't have done that, but I did it because I really like Brandon and I don't want to piss him off or whatever. And it's just so interesting to kind of look at those two motivations, I guess is the best word for it.
Yeah, you definitely tell Philip got put up to this, that it's not his idea. Granted, I think he was a willing participant. I think he was like you're saying, maybe trying to impress Brandon, or maybe he has this sort of dark side to him as well. Because he's definitely, once things clear, once Mrs. Wilson shows up and they've cleaned up and everything, it seems like he kind of gets into character. It seems like he's going to float well with it. And it's only towards once Rupert shows up and starts asking a bunch of questions, and he's like, okay, I'm getting kind of nervous now. And I love that scene with the piano.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
He's sitting there, he's playing it, and he's supposed to be a concert pianist that he's never going to mess up, especially something like this that's kind of like his routine. This is like his default mode. And just Rupert's questioning's messing him up. I mean, and I'm not a huge fan of Farley Granger. I think he's not the best actor, but I think for this role, like you were saying, he's sort of sheepish, sort of shy. I think he kind of worked for this. I think this is kind of a good part for him to play, and I think he handles it pretty well. I mean, you could accuse him of overacting a little bit toward the end, especially when he's like cat and mouse, or something like that. And he's like, which was the cat, which one's the mouse? He's definitely a weird line reading, but I think that kind of adds to it. I think it shows you this guy is so off kilter by this sort of guilt that's breaking him down. It's very Poe-ish a little bit. I mean, just this whole, we have this body hidden over here, but one guy is just going to crack and kind of spill the beans just because the guilt is kind of overcoming him.
Yeah. He's got that remorse that Brandon doesn't have. And when Rupert comes in and starts asking the questions, you really see, like you said, the breakdown of this guy's facade that he's trying to hide behind. And I really think that he doesn't ever come out and say anything, but I really think Rupert smells something almost immediately. I think he's kind of clued into, I don't know what's going on, but something weird. There's a weird vibe going on, and he really tries to poke at it and figure out. And that's why I said you think he's going to figure it out. And I'm glad it wasn't like, oh, I knew there was somebody dead. I'm glad it wasn't, something corny or anything like that. I'm glad that it took to the end of the film. I think he almost matches Brandon, Rupert, almost pound for pound. I think they're a lot alike.
Definitely. Yeah, man, I see what you're saying. And I think he does get something just because he see who's been gathered here at this little get together. And he's just like, this is a bizarre mix. It's it's David's best friend. It's David's girlfriend. It's David's dad. Where's David? And it's just kind of like, this is not right. So he's not clued in yet, but he starts figuring it out, starts putting those pieces together. And I like what you said. He doesn't do it all right away. Actually, there's a part of him, I think, that is wanting it not to be true. That he's just like,
I'll go with that.
I think this happened, but at the same time, I want to believe that Brandon wouldn't do something like this, that Philip wouldn't do something like this. And that's kind of the interesting part of the climax, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's a lot of stuff here in this film.
There is.
So before we get to James Stewart as Rupert, I do want to talk about a couple of these other parts just because I think that it's easy to overlook them. I don't really have anything to say about Kenneth, though. I think Kenneth is most vanilla character you could possibly imagine. Do you have anything to say about Dennis Dick as Kenneth, or just move on from that?
Not really.
Nah, I'm glad he's there for the beginning because he's kind of like the appetizer. He's kind of like here to see sort of how these guys are react to another guest being there. But to me, the one character that does kind of interest me is Joan Chandler as Janet, because I mean, she's there in this awkward situation, but you never see her lose it. You never see her break face.
No.
Yeah. To me, that's just very interesting. What do you think about this performance?
I mean, like so many of them, I really feel like that it. You mentioned over the top, and a lot of these characters almost feel like there could be over the top or whatever. And I think with her, I think she could get to a certain point where it'd be too over the top, but I don't think she gets there. I like what you said. I think she's a very interesting character. You don't know what to think of her, or at least I didn't. You have to watch the entire film. What about you, man?
Well, I think she's interesting because she is this, and that's all of them. They're all part of this weird society of just upper, sort of, I guess, rich people would say. And the circles they roam in is not like the circles that you and I, the normal people, kind of roam. No. And I think that's kind of conditioned her to kind of put up with some stuff that she really can't come out and combat Brandon the way she wants to. She feels like, I got to be polite, I got to be nice, I got to laugh at these jokes that these people tell, even though this is insanely awkward, and I'm uncomfortable by this, and I would just like to leave, but she's got to save face. And to me, that's very interesting, because she's definitely not the lead, but just her dynamics in the situation, seeing how it plays out, is very gratifying to me. And I wonder what it was like the next day when she found out what happened. Because it's now, one character that you often see in like Hitchcock type films is like the helper. She's there for comedic relief or something like that. Yeah, that's kind of what Mrs. Wilson is. Evanson is her. What do you think about her performance?
Yeah, I mean, and surprisingly, for such a small role, I think she does make an impact in the entire story. I think she may even sense stuff. I think she's kind of clued in on something's going on. She never really says, or at least I don't remember her saying anything that confirms anything. But I think she's got her, ear to the ground, so to speak, and can kind of figure. I don't think she likes Brandon too much. I think there's some animosity there. And so I don't think she trusts him, which, I mean, I wouldn't trust Brandon either, but I think that she doesn't really figure anything out like Rupert. I think she gets close. I think she kind of senses something maybe, but maybe not to the degree that Rupert does. How about you?
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, she's figuring something out. Something's amiss, because she's like, why did you send me out of the house to go do all this stuff? Why did you rearrange all my decorations? Why did you want me to set up the table here on this random place after I spent all this time setting up the table over here? So she's into that, and they must pay her amazing, because I don't understand why she still has this job. It seems like they treat her like crap, and
basically,
I mean, Rupert's the only person we see kind of treat her as an actual human being. It seems like everybody else is just like, oh, she's just the help. She's here to clean up. They inconvenience her so much. It kind of irritates me. It makes me hate Brandon a little bit, because I just don't like seeing people get treated like this. But the actual actress, the performance she does, she gets the humor in there. She's a funny character. Like I said, Hitchcock loves these like maid type characters that are probably smarter than some of the main characters, but they're kind of regulated the sidelines. And that scene where she is basically unsetting the table and moving everything from one room to the other, so that we see the place where David's body's hidden starts to get clearer and clearer while this other conversation is just happening. We're just hearing this conversation. Very suspenseful, very fun scene.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about, because there's a lot of conversation. I mean, this film is all conversations, what it is. There's a lot of conversation, and they talk about a lot of different things. And they talk about sexuality, but not in the way that it's just like, unless you really knew what they were talking about, not in the way that maybe a lot of people would understand. I just thought it was an interesting way to make all these jokes. I mean, they talk about the chicken thing, and all these little puns and everything. What were your feelings on the way that they discussed that subject in particular?
Well, I think it's pretty clever because they had to sneak it by the censors, and they got it through because this is post-Hays Code. And I think they did a better job handling it than, let's say, Psycho did. I mean, Psycho just comes down and says, "Oh, he's a transvestite. He dresses up as women. He's a weird guy." Meanwhile, this one, I think, it doesn't judge these people. It just says this is part of them, and if you can catch that, that's interesting.
Right.
So I think the dialogue is insane. I think that's a big part of it is basically every scene we are seeing something at stake. Yes, we have this whole ticking time bomb. Is like, are they going to find the body? But even within that, we have these weird games that are happening where Brandon's doing his thing, trying to irritate people or trying to press their buttons, and we're trying to see what's going to happen as a result of that. And once Rupert shows up to the party, that kind of changes that a little bit. Like, I don't know if you get it, whenever James Stewart shows up, it's a totally different vibe, isn't it?
Right. No, I was about to mention that, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think once Rupert shows up, like I said, I think therein lies the match for Brandon. I don't think anybody could match Brandon but Rupert, at least with the people that you see in this movie. It's an interesting character because he's not rude, he's not vulgar, but he's a little bit harder than, say, George Bailey was in It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, this is a little bit more of a, I don't know, cynical kind of guy, maybe. I don't know. I found the character interesting, and I found that Jimmy Stewart's performance I thought was really, really good. And I mean, obviously, you don't think it's not going to be because of Jimmy Stewart, but I really thought that he didn't overplay the other guys or anything. Like, it wasn't all of a sudden Jimmy Stewart's movie and everybody else went to the back of the line. But I do think he brought an element that kind of, made everything on the level with whatever's going on.
He definitely plays his part, and that's kind of the neat thing about this film. It is very much an ensemble thing. It's all these pieces working together. Everybody gets a moment to shine in here. And I agree with you. He's very much an oddball. He's got his idiosyncrasies, walks around with a cane, even though I guess he is supposed to like reference that he got hurt in the war. So his character has seen some stuff, and he's definitely got that dark nature to him. So that's what I was saying earlier. Like, it's interesting that Jimmy Stewart gravitated to this character, and he was like, this is the kind of character I want to play after I've seen war. And definitely see how he is putting the pieces together. He is asking these questions all the time, but at the same time, he's still playing a part. He doesn't want to let it go his hand too much. What you were saying earlier, it's like he doesn't. I don't know if he wants to discover everything. I think there's a part of him is just like, if I could just get my hat and leave and just never think about this again, that would kind of work for me too. I don't know. He's a very interesting character, and I can't really think of another time that Jimmy Stewart plays a character like this. That it's kind of just a weird guy. I would probably want to hang out with him, but I don't think he and I would. I don't think he has friends, actually.
No, I mean, I think that Brandon is probably the weirdest guy in the thing. I think he's got a whole other side of him that we only see the tip of the iceberg with. I mean, I think if they could have delved deeper, I think it'd be really dark. I don't put Rupert in the same boat there, but I do think that he can smell the darkness of Brandon. And I think I was a compliment, but definitely not intimidated by Brandon like Philip is, or any of the other characters, really.
Nice. He's not intimidated because he basically created him. That's kind of the interesting thing about it, is this whole thing sparked from conversations that he and Brandon used to have. And I'll come back to that thought later, because there's actually one scene I want to talk about real fast, is this bizarre scene where they start talking about Nietzsche and just murdering people. Party conversation, and everybody's playing along with it. Except David's dad. He's just like, I'm sorry. You people are crazy. What are you guys talking about? This is just a very interesting scene, how it just kind of takes you for the ride, how you're just listening to these people talk about killing people for fun, and then, but what do you think about that scene?
Look, I have a problem with any scene in this film, but if I had to pick one scene where I was just like, I don't know, it kind of slowed the movie down. Even though the movie wasn't really going at a fast pace, I feel like it slowed it down even more on this scene. Yeah, I get the humor, I get the dark humor and it being awkward and all that. But again, I don't really mind it at all, but I just felt like if I had to say what I didn't like about this film, it would probably be this scene in particular. And not so much for the content or whatever, but I just felt like it drugged the movie even on a slower pace than it was already going. I don't know, maybe that was just the way I felt when I was watching it, and maybe I'd feel differently if I went and watched it right now. But I know a few times when I watched the scene, I would just, because I guess I'm expecting some kind of bombshell. I'm expecting something to happen, and it never really does. And it's just talk. And again, I don't mind that at all. I am so into that. I love dialogue, and I think this movie does it extremely well. I think the writing is off the charts great. But that's my ramble for a second. Sorry about that. But
yeah, and I hear you saying you can never critique this scene because it almost gets overly heavy-handed here.
Yeah,
it's like, hey guys, here's the point of the movie right here. Human life is valuable. You can't just treat it off because David's dad just comes in and you people shut up. You guys are crazy. And it's almost like, okay, guy, I see you're mad and you're whoever your son is, but it's almost like he plays it too hard. It's like, It's like, I don't know. It just seems like I'm talking directly to the audience at this point.
A little bit, yeah.
I get that a little bit, but at the same time, I do like sit here Miss Atwater like giggle along. Like, oh, this sounds so funny. Rupert, you're such a devil, you. And
see, and she's, like you said before, I mean, she's kind of the comedy relief in this a little bit. And I just think it's hilarious because she has no idea what's going on. She's as clueless as anybody. And her little comments, just like, she doesn't even know where she is right now. I mean, it makes for a humorous part of the film, no doubt.
Yeah, and like I said, it's getting to the point of this film a little bit, if there is a theme to it. And it also gets back to my point I was making earlier, how these like social people, this circle, it's just very bizarre. They're totally removed from reality. Like, this is not how normal people talk. And for them, though, they're academically pursuing this thought of like, well, yeah, what if we could murder people? What would that be like? Yeah, maybe we could kill a few like poor people, some dumber people. It'd be fine. No big deal. It's a very interesting scene. I find just this whole social nature of this film very interesting. I don't know exactly what Hitchcock was trying to say with this film, other than this is a cool story. I like this sort of exercise and sort of structure that he goes here, because he dabbled with this before, trying to have like a continuous shot. But I think in this film, it really works.
My one suggestion as far as what Hitchcock was trying to say is something that I heard actually today. I was watching something and somebody was talking about how that we all have this darkness in us and we all have this potential to basically just go and murder somebody. I mean, you're not going to because you know it's wrong and you have self-restraint, but some people don't have that and they just go off and they do this thing. While it was maybe a little bit too on the nose in this film, I think that's the thing, is he was trying to say we're all a little weird, we're all a little dark, we all have these little things, but there's these certain people that take that maybe a little too far. You know, we know so much more nowadays about the criminal mind and the mind itself and why people degenerate and do horrible stuff. Because if you look at Brandon, the other guy, just by their looks, you wouldn't call them murderers. But there's so much more deep down, especially for Brandon's sake, that is not on the surface. And I think, especially at this time period when this movie came out, nobody was really into that yet. We haven't really figured all that out yet. So I think that's what Hitchcock was trying to do, is kind of start that conversation.
Yeah, and I think as it's building up into like the climax, it is getting into like what this film is trying to say, is saying that, yeah, some people in our society do not love their fellow human beings. They look down upon them. They treat them like they're not even human. And that's just a danger because these people are coming after the war and they've seen people basically get like murdered by the millions. I mean, we go to Asia, we see the Asian Holocaust. We also have the major Holocaust. These people thought they could just do this because they were superior. And that's the thing is we have Brandon and Philip think they're superior to society. And Rupert thought he was too. But once he gets confronted with this actual evil that these two guys have done because of his words, it's just, it's really amazing. And this is my favorite part of this whole film is how it just builds up to this thing where he discovers it. He finds the hat. He's like, wait a second, this is David's hat. This is not my hat. And he comes back to the apartment. He's got the whole thing with a gun. And it gets very intense. And then we have this big old monologue from Jimmy Stewart that just, it's just so fiery. He's almost like he's a preacher or something all of a sudden. He's bringing forth this hellfire and brimstone speech. And he's just calling these guys out. It's one of my favorite parts of like Hitchcock in general, just how it builds up to this scene and this execution by James Stewart.
Totally agree. I mean, I think the writing is on point, like I said earlier, but I think his delivery on this, I mean, when you want Jim Stewart to really just show you anger or rage or whatever, I mean, this guy can go all out. And I think he certainly does at this point, which as an audience member, you're like, yeah, that's probably, that's almost like a release of all this tension that you've had watching this film of, are they going to get caught? Is somebody going to figure it out? What's going to happen? And you get to that point where it's just, like I said, almost a release of attention. And it's just all the more brilliant coming from somebody like Jimmy Stewart, who is just one of our best actors ever. Poignant part of the film. And I agree with you. I think it is probably the best part of the film, for sure.
Yeah, and I know James Stewart's not for everybody. Some people say he's a little over the top. I mean, this guy started on stage, probably did some silent work before that. So that's just how they were taught to act. And to me, it's complemented by what Hitchcock's doing throughout this whole film, because it's one continuous shot, like we said. At least it's giving that illusion of that. And if you pay attention to what's going on outside, like you basically see the sun go down, you see this sort of neon lights come on and how they're flashing in to this apartment during this scene, making it feel like sort of nightmarish a little bit while Stewart's having this speech. To me, that's what makes the scene. And then just it pans back and shows these three guys sitting there in this room while Philip's just like, I guess I'll go sit down at the piano. It's a great way to end the film, and that's why I know this film's awesome, because for me, that scene and how it ends, it just floors me. I'm just sitting there, my mouth open, watching this happen, and you could just make a painting of that scene right there. It's beautiful. It's magical. It's film in action.
I mean, if you're familiar with Hitchcock at all, it's not going to be sunshine and rainbows at the end of the movie. There's just going to be some darkness there, especially with a movie like this. And I'm telling you, I love the aspect that it's a contained film. It's very contained. And I mean, I could see where that would probably put some people off of this film. But I think if you really sit down and just take this film in, it's such a ride, like you said. And just blows me away.
Yeah, this film is for those that like classic Hollywood, but also they like to see an experiment like this play out, because it's hard to make a film like this, to make it engaging. Just one scenario told in real time. Dialogue is the key here, and to me, I love stuff like that. To me, I could just hear some great dialogue, and I mean, I'm in heaven here. And that's why this film works for me. I know it's not for everybody, especially if you want to get into like the musical aspects. Like, this film doesn't really have any score or anything like that, which is kind of interesting. So it doesn't have all those classical tropes that you would see in Hitchcock, like all the classic editing and things like that. But to me, it still stands up there with one of his best. I know he felt bad that this was basically a failed experiment, but to me, I think this experiment is really neat, and I would definitely recommend this film to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating look at our world, because like you said, this was post-World War II, and which our world changed a whole lot because of that. And I think it's kind of a interesting way to see where we came from after the war.
Yeah. Just pick up the pieces, kind of like these guys at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Just, this is what's happened. How are we going to live with this afterwards?
Yep. Any other negatives? Because I know you haven't said a lot of negatives. I mentioned the scene earlier, but is there anything that just sticks out for you, just to kind of make it fair?
Some of the things that bother me, the more I take this film in, the less they bother me, such as, I already mentioned the music. I mentioned how Hitchcock's kind of got like one hand tied behind his back the whole time. He's like, I could zoom in, I could zoom out, I could dolly in, dolly out. Not his normal stuff.
Right.
But I guess, as I was saying earlier, Farley Granger, not the best actor.
No.
I would say this is his best performance, though, because I've seen him in a lot of stuff. And as this character, as Philip, especially in the scenes with the piano, he's pretty good. And I know that's probably not him really playing, but he creates the effect of this character that's sort of just detached from reality, very much the spin with the sky and will do whatever.
Yeah.
And also has a little bit dark side to him. I think it fits and it works. I really don't have much to critique with this film because, like I said, it's one of those things where I can overlook a lot of its flaws just because I look at the context of the film, and the more I watch it, the more the things that didn't work for me.
Yeah. I think anything that bothers me about this film, it's not enough to go, oh man, to really freak out. This film is simple, but I don't want that to sound bad either, because I really feel like what is done here is done extremely well. And if you're a fan of dialogue, if you're a fan of just suspense and a good mystery, which I guess is not a mystery because we know who did it. But I guess the mystery comes in with, are they going to get caught or not? That's the mystery. Is Brandon going to be humble because he has no humility in him whatsoever? Obviously no remorse. And I just think it's an interesting ride to see what's going to happen after that. And, I don't know how it would have been perceived when this came out, but I know when I was watching the film for the first time, it just blew my socks off. I was just like, all right, where has this film been all my life? Because it really, really just grabbed me. And I know we've talked about it for a long time, and we've probably watched it between us now 20 times. And it just keeps grabbing me every single time. So
yeah, highly recommend it, especially if you've dabbled in Hitchcock, but you've only seen like his well-known films like Psycho or The Birds or something. It's the one that offers something those do not. And at the same time, it's still the same flavor of food, really. It's same type of food. And I really like Hitchcock. I really enjoy this film and recommend it to those that are other film lovers.
Thank you guys so much for joining us again on the Supercast. What do you think of Rope? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what your favorite Hitchcock film is if it's not this one. If you like this, please give us a thumbs up on the video and make sure to subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at the Supercast with a Z. And a lot of fun during this episode. Glad we finally got to do it. And you guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you next time on the Supercast.